Hey everyone, welcome back to another C# RPG tutorial. So in this tutorial we're going to be creating a range spell. So our player is going to be able to select our enemy and they can cast and send out a spell, and that spell will constantly follow them until it actually hits the enemy. So whether they're running along the terrain really far, the spell will follow the terrain and stay above it at a certain height, just so it doesn't go below the terrain. And it'll keep going until it reaches the enemy and hits them, and it'll deal damage. So the first thing we want to do is actually create the particle system that we're going to be using. So we'll create an empty game object again. And on here we're just going to add a box collider. So component physics box collider. And we'll make this a little bit larger so it has a little bit wider area to hit our enemy. And then we're going to want to add a spell system. So we're just going to be adding a particle. And for this we want to change, let's see here, change this to world. So as it's going, you see it leaves a trail behind it. So what we can do is we can change the speed to something lower. We can actually do 0.1 probably, just so it stays within that area and it leaves a trail as it goes. Okay, so we'll make this a little bit larger. So we want to change the start size. And then let's see, we can change color over lifetime, so we can fade this in and out with an alpha. So we'll select that. And we'll change the alpha amount. So let's see here. So when it goes, it'll slowly fade out. Now we do need to change the lifetime of this. So as you see, lifetime, we can set this to a lower amount. If we wanted to flicker, we can set it to 1. As you see, it fades out faster. And so I think the best one might be 0.5 or something in that range. So now we get a slow kind of fade effect there. We can change it to something like red if we want to do like well, I guess more of an orange. If we want to do like a fireball effect or something, or you can change it to blue for frost. You can also come in here and add your own particle in. We'll probably just do that at a later time, but yeah. Just for testing, we'll have it set up like that. And now what we want to do is put it in the center of this game object. And then, let's see, we'll name this range spell. And we'll throw our particle system on there, because we're not going to be using our particle system as the actual spell itself. We're just going to be using this. And then all we want to do is create a C# script, and we can call this just range spell as well. And so when we instantiate this object, it's going to have its own code on it to where it'll follow the enemy that it's assigned to as a target. So we're just going to throw this range spell on there, and we're going to have to code a few things on our player. So when our player actually casts the spell, we're just going to make it an instant for now. Later on I'll show you guys how to do the cast bars and whatnot. But for now we're just going to do an instant spell and have the spell go, follow, hit the enemy, and deal damage to the enemy in that way. So we're going to jump into our code and we're going to go work on our player script for actually being able to spawn this spell. So the first thing we're going to do is jump into our user stats and create everything that we need to actually spawn the spell. So we're going to go down here and create a public game object. And this is going to be for our prefab, so we can name this range spell prefab. And so we'll put our prefab onto here, and we'll actually instantiate the prefab depending on which one we have set. And then we'll go down here a little ways, and we're going to add in a key that we can actually use to call this range spell. So I just set it up so when I press the 2 key, it'll do the range spell, and 1 is just for the basic attack. So now all you have to do is come down here and actually create the script or the function for the ranged attack. And so what I did was pretty much just copy the code from what we did with our respawn point, but I just changed it slightly to work with this code. So pretty much I created a vector 3. We're going to be spawning this at the center of our player, and this is where the spell is going to spawn. Now you could set this up so it spawns at maybe their hand, so it looks like the spell is coming out of their hand instead of out of the center of their body, but for testing we're just going to leave it at the center. And now we want to do is just create a clone, and we're going to instantiate our range spell prefab, and we want to set the location to the spawn location, and the identity we're just going to leave it like that. Now what we're going to do is whatever selected unit that we have, or you can name this target, whatever you want, but this is the game object that we referenced in past tutorials that whenever we clicked on an enemy, it sets them as the selected unit. So you might have to go back and watch that tutorial to figure out how I did that selection system. But so whatever the enemy we have selected, we want to grab the range spell. So on the actual object, so after we instantiate this clone, we're going to grab the range spell, which is here. And what we're going to do is set the target to selected unit. So what this is going to do when we write our range spell code is it's going to follow that target until it reaches it, depending on what the distance is. You can do it by distance, or you can do it by just collision, just on collision, enter, or anything like that. But for this one, I think we're just going to set up a distance. So let's go jump into our range spell and set that up. So now in our range spell, we actually want to go in and make it so this spell will follow the enemy until it hits it. So right now we just set up our target. So this is going to be when we originally spawn the spell itself, we want to set the target to the selected unit that we currently have. So whatever enemy is selected, this is where the spell is going to be following. So once it gets set here, the spell is going to go through and actually find the target position, and it'll constantly be updating it and rotating towards it, so it's going to be using look at. And then we're going to be calculating the distance between the actual target that we want to hit and this transform position. And while that is greater than, I guess we can do 2.0f, it'll constantly go and until it actually hits that enemy. So right here is where you can be a little bit lenient depending on what you want the hitbox to be. So if you want the hitbox to be further, you can set this number to be higher. But for now, we're just going to set it to this one. And so while we haven't reached that amount yet, that distance, we're going to constantly move forward towards that enemy until we hit them. If we get anywhere below this, so if we actually hit the target, we're going to just call hit target, and we're going to destroy this. Now what we could also do is use a send message, and send a message to the enemy and set up something like deal damage, but I don't think we're going to do that in this tutorial. I went over a little bit of send message last time, but yeah. So yeah, we can just go jump into game, and actually before that we have to go and set up the actual prefab. So we can go in and set up the prefab, and we can just call this range spell again. Range spell. And we're going to take this range spell and we're going to place it onto there just to create the prefab, and we're going to close that out. And now all we need to do is go onto our player and set our range spell. So range spell prefab, we're just going to drag that on there because we want that one to spawn. So I ran into a slight issue with the setup here. So instead of selected unit like we had here, I guess we need to set it to clone in order to actually get it to apply to that target. So just change this to clone, and we can go back into game and test it out. So now that we're in game, we'll find our enemy and we'll select them, and we'll shoot the fireball, and you see that the fireball spawns here, and once it hits, it goes away. So that's a simple way to implement a range spell. Now we could do a bunch more with this, where we can make it follow the terrain and do a bunch of different stuff. Maybe you want it to go in a certain pattern or go up in the sky and come down. We can set up a bunch of different stuff, but I think I want to save that for a later tutorial. We could also set it up, because I want to set up the actual spell casting with cast time, and if you move it cancels the spell, and a couple other things with spells, and make it so you have to be facing towards the enemy to fire the spell as well. So there's a bunch of different things we could do with this. But if you guys just want to implement a quick way to cast spells, you can do it that way, because I'm guessing if we go down here it'll probably shoot right through the terrain. Yeah. But we'll make it in the future so it'll actually follow along the top of the train and go to the enemy and set up all that other stuff. But yeah, until next time. Oh, also, since it has that collision box and it's spawning at the center of us, it has kind of a knockback. So we probably don't even need the... So if you're setting it up the way that I did, where we're calculating it by range instead of actually using a hitbox, you can actually get rid of the box collider itself, or just set it as a trigger if you wanted to. We could probably just get rid of that altogether and it can work. So if you're making maybe a physics type game, you might use that. And if you see here, we also probably have to set, if we don't have a target selected, that it shouldn't be firing. But yeah, we'll get that all fixed in the future, and I'll see you guys in the next tutorial.